Alright, so I should have known that when I released the last video, and I had already successfully transferred all of my scripts over to AutoHotkey version 2, that I would inevitably have to come along and make an updated video going through the scripts in AutoHotkey version 2 to show the differences. So I guess here we are, doing that. So if I just run through the scripts piece by piece, you're probably not going to be able to notice the differences all that much. They're probably going to look relatively similar. So what we're going to do is now when we come in here, there we go. This is the right way around. So we're going to be looking at the one on the right now, the proper side, and we'll be able to go through all the changes and everything that's changed since, I guess, AutoHotkey version 1.1 of the scripts will be in green, or there may be sections that have been removed completely that will just be grayed out. Let's just go through this piece by piece and see what's changed, I guess. A lot of the stuff that is different between AutoHotkey version 1.1 and version 2 is literally just like removing commas or extra syntaxing that doesn't exist anymore. So you may notice, for example, up here in the set working directory, there's a comma and then it's followed by percentage signs on either side. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So that's not a thing. And then you'll notice there's just a lot of blocking of removing commas, and that's pretty much just how it is. And then in 2.0, there's a lot more quotation marks around basically everything. So you'll start to notice that a lot as we go further and further down, but yeah, look, there's going to be a lot of that. So pretty much, as stated up in this top section, it's just removing commas and then adding quotation marks on the right-hand side. And then removing this code here for the icon, as I actually found this in the AutoHotkey documentation. You can just set the icon via a file with one line. There you go. And then all of this stuff has been changed since, obviously, because the information needed to be updated. And then here in the Windows section, we come across our first difference. If when active, if when not active, blah, 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 doesn't exist anymore in AutoHotkey version 2. It's been replaced by hot if. So I assume it means like hotkey if, and then, whatever. But hot if not active doesn't exist. So what you have to do is hashtag hot if, and then not, and then when active, and then your window. So there's a lot of like doing things in kind of roundabout ways, but is just the way that it is now going forward. Also, you might notice that things like this aren't highlighted like a different color and might appear white. That's just because in VS Code, at least from what I've been able to find, there's no real like good version 2.0 syntax highlighting. There's like one, but it's also split in Chinese. So you'll hover over something and it'll not only give you information about it, but then it'll also have an extra line of like different characters and stuff. And like, well, it's probably not the worst thing ever. It's just kind of distracting and it makes the text box way bigger than it needs to be. And yeah, okay. Anyway, starting hotkeys is the same. And then here is our difference. Right off the bat. There is no longer a need for return at the end of every hotkey because you are defining everything within braces. Everything is its own little function now. So you'll start a hotkey with an opening brace and you'll end a hotkey with its closing brace. And that's it. You may also notice this here. This wasn't here the last time I went through code. This is a function that I have since added to both the 2.0 branch and the main branch that is defined in this line here, which is include, and then this other script. And you'll see here it says includes function definition so they don't clog up this script. So it's an entire script that just defines functions. I have one for, this is the main branch, so it has returns. I don't even know if these are necessary in the main branch version, but yeah, look, I just left them in because they work and I just couldn't be bothered. I only maintain the version 2.0 like side of things now, right? I just didn't have time to mess with this. So this wouldn't be here in the version 2.0, and then you would just define your function in braces, what it means, and then you can call upon that function later. So chords with an S and then two braces is just defining coordinate mode as screen, if you remember from the last video. So that's these two lines of code here. So I'm basically just splitting these out into functions so that one, if I add a new script, I can just write it out really easily because I don't need to remember the proper syntaxing for it. And B, it cuts down on lines that I need. which is always helpful so scripts don't get freaking crazy. The next thing is running the directory. You'll notice removes the comma and adds quotation marks. You're going to be seeing that a lot. I'm not kidding. This line of code here is exactly the same because I actually copied this from the 2.0 script into the 1.1 script. So I guess you can ignore that. I don't even know if this would run properly in the 1.1 script. It might. Oops. Anyway, moving on. This is a pretty big difference here, the reload script. So things had to get a bit more complicated in version 2.0 because they don't work the same way that they used to. So the old way would be reload and then sleep, the same as, it is now. But it would then be message box followed by the type. Yeah, so options and then title text timeout. So this here would be timeout, I believe. And then this is the text that would be there. And then if message box, yes. And then you define what happens when you press yes. Now it's a little bit different. Now you just write result followed by a colon and then a equal sign. And then message box. And then the same thing, but just like reoriented more or less. And then you define it like logic, right? If result equals yes, then you have a function that then goes through it, right? So if when exist code.exe, which is this program, when activate, else run the program. And then that's it. This took me way too long to try and figure out. But I got there in the end. Let's go documentation. We did it. And then here with the Discord one is where we come across my first hindrance with AutoHotkey version 2.0. I don't know if it's a bug or I don't know if it's intended and the documentation just doesn't really make any sense, but when you use WinMove now and you try to use the WinText variable, which is it only the WinText variable or does it not work with the, or maybe it doesn't work with the WinText or the WinTitle. I only recall it not working with WinText, but maybe because I've split this out, it doesn't work with either. Or maybe I just did this for sanity's sake. I don't know. But anyway, I was having very specific issues with WinText because in my stream opening script, for example, you'll notice for WinMoves here, you'll see I just use Twitch or All Moons Updated v1.3.0, right? That's the title of the tab in Firefox. So that would allow me to separate the two tabs instead of just trying to move all of Firefox, because that clearly wouldn't work. If I use that kind of code, it doesn't seem to work. It freaks out with an error message and says it couldn't find the window. Even if the window is open and there, it can't find it, or it just doesn't do anything. So, I don't know if it's a bug, or I don't know if that's intended, or maybe it only works if you break it out into logic now, because that's the point. I don't know. I assume that maybe is it, and they just don't make reference to it in the documentation at all, but there you go. So now instead of being able to have this as one line of code, I have to break it out, because if you don't have the logic, it doesn't work. So instead of just being WinMove and then whatever, and then the coordinates, you have to break it out as if when exist, then Discord, WinMove, and then your coordinates. This goes the same with programs that don't use this line and instead use WinText, which you can see in here. If I open it up, start mainstream, down here, WinWait, and then the window with a timeout, WinMove, and then the coordinates. So it's basically waiting for that window and then doing that. At this point in the line, that window already exists, so it's always going to exist. So the WinWait logically doesn't make any sense to put here, because I know for a fact that it's there because I'm dealing with it here. But that's not the way it works anymore, and this is how you have to do it. Again, not really sure if bug or if intended, but whatever, I guess. So then moving on, opening my Pokemon playlist. Pretty much the same thing, removing a bunch of commas, adding quotation marks around strings, and then that's pretty much it, aside from changing the WinMove logic from, I could have just explained it here. Oh well, whatever. Instead of just WinMove, you have to break it out into logic. If it exists, WinMove. Exceptional. Thanks, AutoHotkey, for just breaking my brain. And then that code to toggle things always being on top is no longer WinSet and then comma, and then always on top. It's now just when set always on top, no comma, -1, then a comma, then in quotation marks, A for active. Not confusing at all. Thank you. Then moving on, opening Excel, same thing, removing comma, adding quotation marks, nothing too crazy. Same thing for the copy thing, of course, with removing look, a lot of me adjusting this code was straight up just, going to the thing, pressing enter, opening brace, going to the return line, deleting that, closing brace, and then getting rid of commas, adding quotation marks. It was a long process of a couple of hours of literally just doing that. I mean, at least it allows me to just knock through this really quickly. So then, instead of if when not active, blah, 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 we go hot if, not when active, Adobe Premiere Pro. And then this is just me changing this 3 line into 1 line because for whatever reason I didn't already have that in the old script, which doesn't really make any sense, but it's fine. And then we go from an if when exist OBS to a hot if when exist OBS. You'll notice that this is now in parentheses as well. This is important. A lot of AutoHotkey stuff is moving to this kind of like syntaxing, just making things more streamlined, I suppose. Everything is basically a function, more or less. And then moving on to our replay buffer script, you'll notice there's also more logic here. If you just try to when activate a window now, that also spits out an error. It'll be like, cannot find the window, rah! Same as like when move. So you pretty much have to do the same thing. You have to break it out into logic. If when exist OBS, then when activate, and then you could also add logic else blah 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 blah. It's kind of annoying, but that's just how you do it now. So cool, thumbs up. Then just moving on, removing commas, adding quotation marks, etc. Then once again, swapping the when active, adding our braces, removing commas, adding quotation marks, dot 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 dot. And then we get to the next thing, same thing, braces, quotation marks, no commas. Then we can move on. If when active to hot if when active, and then the program. Oops. And then I've added a new script here. That's just me changing a keyboard shortcut in Premiere because you can't actually use caps lock in Premiere, which is kind of annoying, but there you go, there's a thing. And then here is our first big change. Big change. So these F1 keys, F2 keys, etc., are very annoying. And they took a lot of time for me to work out the kinks to get working because this way of writing out get key state had to be completely adjusted and rearranged. But basically, we've got our 2 functions as defined in MS functions. This is our coordinate screen and then our block on. So I also added block input on into 1 so that I can reduce 3 lines of code down to 1. And then there's 1 for off as well. It's just, again, makes it easier for me to write new things without having to remember that stuff. Then removing comma, and then you'll notice here, xpos p, ypos p has changed to ampersand xpos, ampersand ypos. This has to be like this now. From my understanding, before you could basically just put anything here and it would work. But now if you want to use the mouse coordinates, it has to be this. Otherwise, like, it freaks out. It doesn't like it. It gets mad. And then removing a comma at the beginning here, but still needing a comma in the middle. If you don't have this comma, it'll be like, too many variables passed a function. Okay, cool. Removing comma, adding quotation marks. And then here we go. Instead of it being get key state and then state first check, which was just a custom variable, and then the key and then the physical as explained before, and then using logic of if this was up, as in you've let go of the key, then do this. It's now different. When you use get key state in version 2.0, it will always assume you mean pressed down. So that means instead of me doing this stuff first, I actually have to do that second. So you'll see this code is now at the beginning because this code was all assuming that the key was up and I've let go. But now in 2.0, get key state is assuming it's down. So when it's down still, what I want to do is, of course, block the inputs, do the key wait. Then after I've let go of the key, click up and return the mouse position to where it needs to be, right? That was down here. So it's basically just after this one line, just rearrange the code. This took me so long because I was trying to figure out how to do it the same way as this with like, you know, a bunch of new like way of doing things like yeah, colon equals value, blah 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 blah, like a whole bunch of stuff. It was terrifying. It was a block of a mess, but I eventually landed on this, and this works the same way as before. And funnily enough, it's also less code, so that's fun. And then obviously the F2 key is the same, F3 key is the same, F4 is the same line of logic. Things have just been moved around a bit. God, it looks like a mess because there's so much extra code over here that like everything's getting shuffled around. And then of course F5 is the same. Again, just a lot of rearranging, but it got there in the end. So outside of the rearranging, there of course was all of the removing of commas and the adding of quotation marks for basically everything. Also, I changed click up left to just click up, like as a send input, just because I don't think I was able to pass this properly, or I just didn't really like using this logic, so I just changed it. Nothing too crazy, no real super crazy purpose behind it, but and then that's pretty much it. It was a lot of manual removing of commas and adding of quotation marks. Great time, had lots of fun. So in my 1.1 scripts, I didn't actually change the numpad stuff. Oops. I should probably go back and change that and edit the release, because that's kind of really stupid of me. But anyway, I also added a preset for the numpad stuff because they were basically the same blocks of code for like no reason. Oh, it's this one here, sorry. So basically this got reduced down to this, which is like 5 lines instead, because yeah. So it has all the stuff that's the same removed, and then the stuff that's different just comes after that. And then for numpad 9, which is my reset button, I couldn't quite do the same because it's not really doing the same thing. So it's pretty much the same amount of code, but yeah. And then these numpad scripts, I finally went back and fixed so that they were all 1 line, because that's all they needed to be the whole time. If I were to have done this before, I think one of the issues that I came across originally and why I separated this out, because if you remember correctly, I think I said it, these were like the first scripts I ever wrote. And when I first started with AutoHotkey and doing these scripts, I had a lot of issues with getting commas sent in like keystrokes when I was doing send inputs, because I was separating everything out by commas. Didn't realize I didn't have to do that, but now that wouldn't happen because you block everything out in quotation marks. So I would do G, and then I would do all of this mess. Cool. So all these lines got reduced down to 3 lines, and now I've numbered them properly, 1, 2, 3 instead of 2, 1, 3. Good job, Tom. And then here is the power of this this preset function. So I'm gonna pull up what this originally looked like. So if I browse the repo at this point and I go to my scripts and I scroll down, so these are what they originally looked like. Just huge blocks of code that are all exactly identical, apart from this line right here that sends a different input into the text field. Apart from that, they're, well, not the text one, but these are all the same, and they do the exact same thing with just one simple difference. So instead, you can define this in a function right here as the preset, call it preset, and then item in the middle, and then that one line that's different, you just write %item %. This is going off the 1.1 AutoHotkey version of the script, by the way, hence all the commas. These wouldn't be here. All this stuff would be in quotation marks in the version 2.0 version, but anyway. And then all of that code, just multiple times, gets reduced down to just 1 line. So now, if I add a new preset in Premiere, I don't have to copy, paste, change that 1 line. I literally just go enter. We'll say Alt Y : and then preset, and then just go, I don't know, man, this video be dope. And then that would just automatically work as soon as I refreshed. It takes like 10 seconds. And then I just reduced the size of this Alt T1 by kind of doing the same thing by using the preset, but I had to do it in a very specific way because the text one obviously does extra stuff, but I just rearranged the code so that it would do the preset stuff last so that I could still do all this. So then these lines of code, which was what, 74 to 96, so like 22 lines, to 68 to 82, which is like, what, 14? Good reduction. Good stuff. Makes it easier. And then further down, again, just removing of like commas down here, sorry, and then adding of quotation marks and braces, and that's it. That's pretty much it. So as I said at the beginning, a lot of like what my scripts are doing, there's not a lot of like difficult changes. A lot of things had me scratching my head and was definitely like a little bit confusing just because I was diving head first into it. But really most of it was just removing commas, adding quotation marks, and then just going from there. But I figured it out in the end, which is nice. You do love to see that. Pretty much the same story with, you know, the resolve example. It's just, you know, there's a lot of removing of commas. This is the 1.1 version, so that's not helpful. There's a lot of removing of commas and et cetera, et cetera. Like, it just is what it is. And then you'll see here's the the version 2.0 version of the presets. There's no more returns. You'll see the resolve example. There's now, you know, the same kind of thing as the 1.1 example. And yeah, and then this has changed a lot too in logic. You know, there's a lot of like stuff has been moved around since I went through it in the video. Obviously, all this like win move stuff is different. So if you care about getting win move to work properly in AHK version 2, I recommend just looking at this and how it's done here. Again, I don't know if it's a bug or if this is just how you're supposed to do it or what. I should note you can also do it. It doesn't have to be a win weight. You can also do it with like a if win exists, like I did this script, right? If it exists, win activate. No, sorry. If win exists, VLC, then win move. The thing is, you just have to be careful because you have to make sure that the program has had ample time to open before you issue an if win exist. Because otherwise, because AutoHotkey moves so fast, if Windows hasn't quite picked up on it yet, and then AutoHotkey tries to trigger the if win exist, and you don't have logic like afterwards to say else, you know, win wait or whatever, then it will give you an error message, and it'll be like, can't find the window, because it's trying to do it too fast, which is both hilarious and annoying at the same time. So definitely keep that in mind. That's why in my main scripts I just used win wait, because it's just less hassle to deal with. Because, you know, when I'm opening like 20 programs all at once, Windows isn't exactly performing at its best. It's kind of not liking its life. But yeah, from now on, I'm basically only going to be maintaining the version 2.0 side of things. Eventually, this probably won't be its own repo, and I'm probably just going to copy everything over to main and then just continue my main dev side of things, and I'll just mostly work on dev. But just for like a little while longer, I'll probably keep it separated just in case we have any stragglers from the video. But when I merge it over, I'll probably change the README to be like, yo, if you came from this video, check this video that you're watching right now so that you can like understand the difference of what happened. All right, so there you go. That's that. That's pretty much all there is to it, really. There's nothing else I can really go over in regards to this. So I hope that helped. I'm going to go fix that version 1.1 code, and I'll see you later. Bye.